Jesus, Julian, you scared me!
Hard to sleep when your wife is having a $847 business meeting until dawn.
Julian Everett stared at his phone screen at 2:47 a.m., watching his wife Monique's location remain stubbornly fixed at the Grandview Hotel downtown. She'd been there for 6 hours now, supposedly in a critical emergency meeting with her boss, Vanessa Carrow, the same boss who'd been texting her at midnight for the past 3 weeks. The same boss whose wife Vanessa had been Julian's college roommate's girlfriend back at Northwestern. Small world. Getting smaller by the minute. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Julian rolled out of their king-sized bed, careful not to disturb the Egyptian cotton sheets that Monique had insisted they needed for their image. Everything in their glass and steel smart home was about image. The Italian marble countertops, the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the Tesla in the garage, all purchased with Julian's investment banking salary while Monique built her PR empire one overpriced lunch at a time. He padded barefoot to his home office, the only room in the house that felt like his. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound financial texts, and a hidden safe behind a framed photo of Warren Buffett. Julian had always appreciated irony. His laptop chimed with a banking alert. Another one. Julian's jaw tightened as he opened the notification. Transaction alert. Joint account ending in 4729. Charge $847.50. Merchant, Grandview Hotel, Restaurant and Bar. $847 for a business meeting that started at 8 p.m. and was apparently still going strong at nearly 3 a.m. Julian scrolled through the itemized receipt that his premium banking service provided. 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, 2 filet mignon dinners, 2 chocolate soufflés, 1 penthouse suite. His phone buzzed. A text from Monique. Still in meeting? Don't wait up. Love you. Julian laughed out loud in the darkness. Actually laughed. The sound echoed off his office walls like a gunshot. He'd been an investment banker for 15 years. He'd seen every type of fraud, every creative accounting scheme, every elaborate lie that desperate people told themselves and others. But this was amateur hour. Monique wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Julian opened his laptop and navigated to his contact list. He found Vanessa Carrow's email address. They'd stayed in loose touch over the years through holiday cards and LinkedIn. He typed slowly, savoring each word. Hi, Vanessa. Hope you and Dom are well. Quick question. Did you know Dom was working late tonight? My wife Monique mentioned they had an emergency client meeting at the Grandview. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay with your family. The receipt from their dinner looked pretty expensive for a work meeting. Best, Julian. He attached the itemized hotel bill and hit send. Then Julian poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan 18 and waited for his world to explode. Monique slipped into their bedroom at 6:15 a.m., moving like a cat burglar. Julian watched her through barely opened eyes as she gathered clothes for her shower. Her hair was mussed, her makeup smeared, and she smelled like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't his. How was your meeting? Julian asked, his voice cutting through the morning silence. Monique jumped, dropping her silk blouse. Jesus, Julian, you scared me. I thought you were asleep. Hard to sleep when your wife is having a $847 business meeting until dawn. Julian sat up, making no effort to hide the bank statement in his hands. That's some expensive emergency client work. Monique's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally, defiance. Julian had seen the same sequence countless times in corporate boardrooms when executives got caught cooking the books. It was a legitimate business expense, she said, lifting her chin. Dom and I were entertaining the Henderson Group. You know how important that account is to my career. The Henderson Group. Julian nodded thoughtfully. Interesting, because I called the Grandview this morning. Funny thing, the concierge remembered Dom checking in. With his wife, he said. Except his wife was a tall brunette, not a short redhead like Vanessa. Monique's face went pale. Julian, I can explain. No need. Julian stood up, straightening his pajama pants with deliberate calm. I already explained it to Vanessa. Sent her the receipt around 3 a.m. I'm sure she'll have questions. The color drained completely from Monique's face. You did what? I did what any concerned friend would do. I made sure she knew where her husband was spending his money. Julian walked past her toward the bathroom. By the way, I'm freezing all our joint accounts this morning. Wouldn't want any more unauthorized business expenses. Monique grabbed his arm. Julian, wait. We need to talk about this. It's not what you think. Julian looked down at her manicured fingers gripping his wrist. The same fingers that had been running through another man's hair 6 hours ago. Actually, it's exactly what I think. The only question now is how messy you want this to get. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Vanessa. We need to talk, today. Julian showed Monique the screen. Looks like it's already getting messy. Julian's friend Alex Bell arrived at the Copper Parrot bar at exactly noon, carrying a laptop bag and wearing his trademark flat expression. Alex ran a cybersecurity consulting firm and had the useful habit of asking no questions while providing exactly the help Julian needed. So, Alex said, sliding into the booth across from Julian, your wife is cheating with her boss, and you want to document everything before the divorce gets ugly. That's the general idea. Julian sipped his coffee. Nothing illegal, just good old-fashioned due diligence. Alex opened his laptop. Lucky for you, Monique never changed her iCloud password, still using your anniversary date, which is either romantic or stupid. Definitely stupid. Julian watched Alex's fingers fly across the keyboard. What are we looking at? 3 months of deleted text messages, automatically backed up to the cloud. Your wife really thought she was being clever. Alex turned the screen toward Julian. Brace yourself. The messages were worse than Julian had imagined. Not just the affair, but the mockery. Monique and Dom laughing about boring Julian and his pathetic attempts at romance. Plans to shift Julian's biggest client, Morrison Industries, to Dom's firm. Discussions about using Julian's name to create shell companies for money laundering. They were going to frame you, Alex said quietly. Look at this message from last week. Julian read Dom's text. Once we get Morrison signed, we can blame the account irregularities on Julian. Make it look like he was skimming. He's so straight-laced, no one will believe he'd fight back. Julian's hands clenched into fists. Screenshot everything. I want copies on 3 different drives. Already done. Alex closed the laptop. What's your next move? I'm going to do what they least expect. Julian smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm going to fight back. That afternoon, Julian drove to Dom's office building and waited in the parking garage. At 5:30 p.m., Dom emerged from the elevator, talking loudly on his phone about sealing the Morrison deal by Friday. Julian stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Hello, Dom. Dom nearly dropped his phone. Julian, what are you doing here? Thought we should chat, man to man. Julian walked slowly toward Dom's new Porsche 911. Nice car. Must be expensive on a PR executive's salary. Look, if this is about Monique, it's about a lot of things. Julian pulled out his house keys and dragged them along the Porsche's passenger side, leaving a deep scratch in the metallic paint. It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about not stealing other men's wives and clients. Dom's face turned red. You psycho! That's a $120,000 car. And my wife cost me a lot more than that. Julian walked around to the driver's side and repeated the keying process. But don't worry. I'm sure your insurance will cover it, if you still have insurance after Vanessa gets done with you. Dom lunged forward, but Julian was ready. He sidestepped and shoved a USB drive into Dom's jacket pocket. Everything, Julian said calmly. Every text, every email, every receipt. Your wife has copies too, So does Morrison Industries. So does your company's board of directors. Julian leaned closer. You're finished, Dom. The only question is how far you fall. Dom's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and went pale. Vanessa's calling. Better answer it, Julian said, walking away. She's probably wondering about that hotel bill. The gossip mill at Monique's PR firm went into overdrive the next morning. Julian learned this from Tasha Williams, Monique's supposed best friend, who called him at 8 a.m. in a panic. Julian, thank God you answered. I need to talk to you about Monique. What about her? Julian was making coffee in his kitchen, enjoying the first peaceful morning he'd had in months. She's telling everyone you've gone crazy, that you're stalking Dom and making up stories about the affair. Tasha's voice was shaky. But Julian, I know it's true. I've known for months. I tried to get her to stop, but she said you'd never find out. Julian set down his coffee mug. And you didn't think to tell me? I couldn't. She's my friend, and I thought maybe it would just burn out on its own. But now there's this private investigator asking questions, and Dom's wife is threatening to sue everyone, and... Slow down. Julian sat at his kitchen island. What private investigator? This woman came to our office yesterday, said she was working for Vanessa Carrow. She had photos, Julian. Photos of Monique and Dom at restaurants, hotels, even at that company retreat in Napa last month. Julian felt a surge of satisfaction. Vanessa was playing her own game, and she was playing it well. The investigator talked to everyone in the office, Tasha continued. Asked about Monique's travel expenses, her work schedule, whether anyone noticed her relationship with Dom. Half the office is terrified they'll get subpoenaed. What did you tell her? Tasha was quiet for a long moment. I told her the truth. About the Henderson Group account that doesn't exist. About the fake client meetings. About Monique bragging that she had Dom wrapped around her finger, and you were too boring to notice. Julian closed his eyes. She said that? I'm sorry, Julian. I should have told you months ago. Monique said you were just a paycheck to her. That once she got the Morrison account moved to Dom's firm, she'd divorce you and take half of everything. Well, Julian said, opening his laptop, she's about to learn that half of nothing is still nothing. By noon, Julian had transferred all assets from their joint accounts to his personal account, frozen Monique's credit cards, and filed preliminary divorce papers citing adultery and fraud. He'd also sent a detailed report to Morrison Industries about Dom and Monique's plan to steal the account. His phone rang. Monique. Julian, what the hell have you done? My cards aren't working and there's some investigator harassing everyone at work. I've protected my assets, Julian said calmly. Standard procedure when your spouse is committing fraud. Fraud? Julian, you're being ridiculous. This is just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. A misunderstanding? Julian laughed. Monique, I have 3 months of text messages where you and Dom plan to frame me for embezzlement. I have hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and witness statements. The only misunderstanding is you thinking I was too stupid to notice. The line went quiet. Then, we need to talk, face to face. No, we don't. Talk to my lawyer. Julian hung up and immediately called Morrison Industries. The charity gala at the Riverside Convention Center was supposed to be Dom and Monique's big night. The PR firm was handling the event, and Dom had planned to announce the Morrison Industries partnership. Instead, it became their funeral. Julian arrived at 7 p.m. wearing his best suit and carrying a manila folder. He'd bought a ticket that morning, claiming he wanted to support the cause. Which was true. The cause of justice. He spotted Monique immediately. She was wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, paid for with money from their joint account before Julian had frozen it. Dom stood beside her, looking nervous and checking his phone constantly. Julian approached the registration table where Sarah Morrison, the CEO of Morrison Industries, was greeting guests. Mrs. Morrison, Julian said, extending his hand. Julian Everett, we spoke on the phone this morning. Sarah's expression hardened. Mr. Everett, I have to say your information was quite disturbing. I thought you should know before making any commitments tonight. Julian handed her the manila folder. Everything's in there. The text messages, the financial records, the plan to use my name for their shell companies. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the documents. Her face grew darker with each page. This is fraud, pure and simple. That's what I thought. Julian glanced toward Monique and Dom, who were still obliviously networking across the room. I believe they plan to make their announcement tonight. Well, Sarah said, closing the folder with a snap, they're about to get a different kind of announcement. 20 minutes later, Sarah Morrison took the stage. The ballroom fell silent as she began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I had planned to announce a new partnership tonight. Instead, I'm here to warn you about something far more serious. Sarah held up the folder. It has come to my attention that certain individuals at Carrow and Associates have engaged in fraudulent business practices, including plans to embezzle client funds and frame innocent parties for their crimes. A murmur ran through the crowd. Julian watched Dom's face turn white. Morrison Industries will not be partnering with Carrow and Associates, Sarah continued. In fact, we will be pursuing legal action against Dominic Carrow and Monique Darrow for attempted fraud and conspiracy. The murmur became a roar. Guests turned to stare at Dom and Monique, who stood frozen near the bar like deer in headlights. Julian walked over to them, still carrying his drink. Surprise, he said quietly. The meeting's been canceled. Dom grabbed Julian's arm. You bastard. You've ruined everything. I've exposed everything, Julian corrected. There's a difference. Monique's eyes were filled with tears, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. Julian, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but... You made a choice, Julian interrupted. Every text message, every hotel room, every lie. All choices. He looked around the ballroom, where hundreds of guests were still staring at them. And choices have consequences. Dom tried to push past Julian toward the exit, but Julian stepped in front of him. Where are you going, Dom? The party's just getting started. The showdown Julian had been planning came 3 days later at the Copper Parrot. He'd invited everyone. Monique, Dom, Tasha, several co-workers from the PR firm, and even some of their mutual friends who'd chosen sides after the scandal broke. Julian arrived early and claimed the large corner booth, ordering drinks for the table. Alex sat beside him, laptop ready, documenting everything for the divorce proceedings. Monique arrived first, looking haggard. She'd been staying at Tasha's apartment since Julian had changed the locks on their house. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes or the desperate edge to her smile. Julian, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. I'm glad you called. We need to talk about this like adults. We're going to, Julian assured her, as soon as everyone gets here. Dom arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by 2 of his remaining employees. He looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His Porsche was in the shop getting repainted, his wife had filed for divorce, and his company was hemorrhaging clients. This is harassment, Dom announced loudly enough for the entire bar to hear. I could have you arrested. For what? Julian asked mildly. Buying drinks for my friends? The bartender, a grizzled ex-cop named Pete, looked up from polishing glasses. Everything okay over there? Perfect, Julian called back. Just having a business meeting. Tasha arrived with 3 other women from the PR firm, all looking uncomfortable but unable to resist the drama. Julian recognized the type. They'd watched the affair unfold for months without saying anything, and now they wanted front-row seats for the finale. Well, Julian said, raising his glass, now that we're all here, I'd like to make a toast. The bar had gone quiet. Even the regulars at the counter had turned to watch the show. To new beginnings, Julian continued, his voice carrying across the room. To learning that actions have consequences, and to the valuable lesson that if you're going to stab someone in the back, you should probably make sure they're not smarter than you are. Dom stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Dom. The voice came from behind Julian. He turned to see Vanessa Carrow walking into the bar, dressed in an elegant black suit and carrying a briefcase. She looked like an avenging angel in designer heels. Dom sat down. Vanessa pulled up a chair and placed her briefcase on the table. I thought you all should know where things stand legally before this gets any more out of hand. She opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Dominic, you're being sued for adultery, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Your company assets have been frozen pending investigation. Your personal accounts are now under my control as part of our divorce settlement. Dom's face went gray. Vanessa, please. I'm not finished. Vanessa turned to Monique. Ms. Darrow, you're being sued for alienation of affection, conspiracy to commit fraud, and defamation. The private investigator's report makes for fascinating reading. Monique started crying. This is insane. All of this over a stupid affair? Over fraud, Julian corrected. The affair was just the cherry on top. Alex leaned forward. Should we tell them about the Morrison Industries lawsuit? Oh yes, Vanessa said, smiling for the first time. Morrison is suing both of you for attempted corporate espionage. Apparently, trying to steal a $50 million account is frowned upon in business circles. The women from the PR firm were whispering among themselves, already planning how they'd tell this story to everyone who wasn't there. Julian could see the gossip spreading like wildfire through their social circles. Dom suddenly lunged across the table at Julian. This is all your fault, if you'd just kept your mouth shut. Julian was ready for him. He caught Dom's wrist and twisted, forcing him back into his seat. If I just kept quiet while you stole my wife, my clients, and tried to frame me for your crimes? You're pathetic, Dom snarled. No wonder Monique came looking for a real man. That was the wrong thing to say. Julian stood up slowly, his investment banker's calm finally cracking. A real man? Dom, you're a middle-aged loser who peaked in college. You drive a leased Porsche, live in a mortgaged penthouse, and your idea of seduction is charging champagne to someone else's credit card. The bar was silent now. Even Pete had stopped pretending to work. You want to know what a real man does? Julian continued. A real man doesn't have to steal another man's wife because he can't keep his own happy. A real man doesn't need to commit fraud to make his numbers. And a real man doesn't blame everyone else when his pathetic life falls apart. Dom tried to stand again, but Julian was faster. He grabbed Dom's shoulders and shoved him back down into the booth with enough force to rattle the table. Stay. Seated. Monique was sobbing openly now. Julian, please. I know I made mistakes, but we had something good once. We can fix this. Julian looked at her for a long moment. The woman he'd married 8 years ago, the woman he'd supported through graduate school, career changes, and countless networking events, the woman who'd called him boring while spending his money on hotels with her boss. No, he said simply. We can't. Vanessa cleared her throat. Actually, there's something else you all should know. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the rest. Julian, I haven't been entirely honest with you about my timeline. Julian frowned. What do you mean? I've been investigating Dominic for 6 months, long before you sent me that hotel receipt. Vanessa opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos, financial records, and legal documents. He's been cheating for years, multiple affairs, all with younger women from his company. Monique was just the latest. The table went silent. Even Monique stopped crying. I hired the private investigator in January, Vanessa continued. I've been documenting everything, building a case. Your wife wasn't Dom's first affair, Julian. She was just the sloppiest. Monique's face went white. What are you saying? I'm saying you were never special to him. You were convenient. Vanessa pulled out a series of photos showing Dom with different women at various hotels and restaurants. Rebecca from accounting, Lisa from the marketing department, Sarah from client services, all within the past 2 years. Dom looked sick. Vanessa, I can explain. No need. I have recordings too. Vanessa pulled out a small digital recorder. Would you like to hear what Dom really thinks of you, Monique? She pressed play. Dom's voice filled the bar, tinny but clear. She's so desperate for attention, she'll believe anything. Thinks she's the love of my life when she's just another easy lay. The best part is she's paying for everything with her husband's money. It's like getting paid to cheat. Monique made a sound like a wounded animal. The women from her office looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. There's more, Vanessa said. Dom's been using company funds to pay for his affairs. Hotels, restaurants, gifts. Over $200,000 in the past year alone. Julian stared at Vanessa with new respect. You've been playing a much longer game than I thought. 22 years of marriage teaches you patience, Vanessa replied. I wanted to make sure I got everything. The company, the house, the investments, all of it. She turned to Dom. By the way, darling, the penthouse is being repossessed tomorrow. I stopped making the mortgage payments 3 months ago. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. Dom's phone buzzed. He looked at it and went even paler. The company board is calling an emergency meeting. They're voting you out, Vanessa said matter-of-factly. I sent them the evidence this morning. Fraud, embezzlement, harassment. You'll be lucky if they don't press criminal charges. Julian felt a surge of admiration for Vanessa's thoroughness. She'd been planning this destruction for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What about me? Monique asked in a small voice. Vanessa looked at her with cold eyes. What about you? You helped my husband steal from his company and tried to frame Julian for fraud. You're going to lose your job, your reputation, and probably face criminal charges? But I didn't know about the other women, Monique protested. Ignorance isn't a defense, Julian said. Besides, you knew about the Morrison Industries scheme. You knew about using my name for the shell companies. You chose to participate. Alex closed his laptop. I think we're done here. The final confrontation moved outside when Pete finally decided the drama was bad for business. The crowd from the bar followed, along with curious passers-by who sensed something entertaining was happening. Dom made one last, desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. This isn't over, he told Julian. I'll fight this. I'll prove you set me up. With what? Julian asked. Your army of lawyers? Oh, wait. Vanessa froze your accounts. Your company connections? They just voted you out. Your reputation? I think we covered that pretty thoroughly inside. Dom's face twisted with rage. He took a swing at Julian, a wild haymaker that Julian saw coming from a mile away. Julian ducked easily and grabbed Dom's wrist, using his momentum to spin him around and slam him face first against the brick wall of the bar. Dom's expensive suit scraped against the rough surface, and his phone clattered to the sidewalk. Here's what's going to happen, Julian said, keeping Dom pinned against the wall. You're going to stay away from me, my business, and anyone I care about. You're going to accept whatever settlement Vanessa offers and disappear quietly. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Julian released him and stepped back. Dom turned around, his face scraped and his dignity in ruins. You think you've won? Dom snarled. I know I have. Julian pulled out Dom's phone and dropped it into a nearby storm drain. The splash echoed in the sudden silence. Game over, Dom. Monique tried one final appeal. Julian, please. I know I hurt you, but we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something. Julian looked at her for a long moment. The woman who'd shared his bed while planning to destroy his life. The woman who'd called him boring while spending his money on another man. It does count for something, he said finally. It counts as 8 years I'll never get back." He turned and walked away, Alex beside him. Behind them, they could hear Monique crying and Dom cursing as he tried to fish his phone out of the drain. "Feel better?" Alex asked as they reached Julian's car. Julian thought about it. His marriage was over, his trust had been shattered, and his comfortable life had been turned upside down. But Dom was ruined. Monique was facing criminal charges, and Julian had his dignity intact. "Actually," he said, starting the engine, "I feel great." 6 months later, Julian sat in his new downtown apartment, reading the morning paper. The business section had a small item about Carrow and Associates filing for bankruptcy. Dom had fled to his brother's house in Phoenix, leaving behind a trail of debt and angry creditors. Monique had pleaded guilty to fraud charges and received 2 years probation plus community service. She was working at a coffee shop in Portland, living with her sister and trying to rebuild her life. Vanessa had taken over Dom's company and turned it into one of the most successful PR firms on the West Coast. She'd sent Julian a bottle of champagne with a note. "To new beginnings and old friends." Julian's phone rang. It was Sarah Morrison. "Julian, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to leave investment banking and come work for us? We need someone we can trust to handle our financial planning." Julian smiled, looking out at the city skyline. "I'd like that very much." After he hung up, Julian poured himself a glass of the champagne Vanessa had sent. He raised it in a toast to his empty apartment. "To the meeting that got canceled," he said aloud, "and to the future that didn't." Sometimes the best revenge wasn't getting even. Sometimes it was simply winning. Julian Everett had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it well, and he'd never forget it.